This video will be a follow-up to the original one that I made, which I called How to Clean a Bike in About 15 Minutes. I wanted to do this based on some of the comments and questions that I received to give some clarification and some additional tips. A few people have asked me, can you do this type of cleaning without a work stand? And the answer is yes. All you really need to do is lean your bike up against the side of a house or lean your back tire up against the tree, and that way you can still spin the crank backwards with a chain cleaner, and of course you can wipe the bike down and spray it down as you need to. It's just going to be a little bit more time consuming and just a little bit harder to reach all the areas, and of course you won't be able to spin the wheels freely to get the rims and tires clean. But I do this a lot when I'm on vacation and don't have my work stand with me. So yeah, it can easily be done. Some people have asked me about products other than Simple Green because Simple Green is not available in their area. And my recommendation is to find something like a bike-specific product. This one is a degreaser from Performance. There are other ones made by Finish Line, Pedro's, and WD-40 actually has kind of a newer line of bike cleaning products and bike lubes that I have not tried, but they look pretty good. If you can't get those things at your local bike shop, I've seen them on Amazon. Of course, you can go to a company like Performance or Colorado Cyclists. Any kind of online ordering company, you should be able to find them. If you're in an area where you can't order those, my recommendation is to just try to find some kind of non-toxic, biodegradable degreaser that you can use. Some people have also questioned the amount of chemicals that I use, and really the only thing that I use, I know that I showed mineral spirits, and I really don't use mineral spirits that often. If there's something that's really greasy that I have to clean, then I'll spray a little bit of mineral spirits, but mainly all I use is Simple Green and just the plain old dishwashing soap. Some people have expressed concern about dishwashing soap on a frame. I've never had a problem. If you do have a concern, really all you need to do is pour a little bit of Simple Green in the water and just use that as your cleaner. So really the only thing that I use is the Simple Green, the dishwashing soap, a chain lube, and GT85 or some kind of spray lube. Of course, you can just remove the dishwashing soap and use Simple Green if you want to limit the amount of chemicals that you use in the process. Some people have also made comments about all of the brushes and things that I use. Obviously, the more things that you have, the easier it's going to be, but really, you could narrow it down to just using probably a sponge and one of these gear brushes. You can also clean, and I'll show how to do it in a minute, without using a chain cleaner. You can just use a gear brush to clean the chain. I got a few comments in the original video saying that my bike was not that dirty, and I will admit it was not covered in mud, but my bike has been completely covered in mud at certain times, and the process really works the same. If it's really covered, then you're going to want to spray down the bike and get as much mud off as possible before you start the actual detail cleaning. And this bike I'm going to clean, and this is really not that dirty at all, but it's been a while since I've cleaned the drivetrain, and I actually got caught into some rain today. So I'm going to clean this bike and again just give a little bit of additional tips. Some people have asked me about applying any kind of lube to the shaft of the shock and the stanchion tubes of the fork. My response to that is you do not want to add any lube or grease to these after you're done cleaning the bike, because that will actually attract dirt, which could work its way down inside the seals. If you do your routine maintenance on the shock and on the fork, on the shock, it's called air sleeve maintenance, and I actually have a video on my YouTube channel showing how to do that, and changing the oil in the fork. If you do those services every 30 to 50 hours, as Fox recommends, you will use what Fox calls float fluid. And that is put inside the shock and in the top of the fork, and that will keep the seals lubed as they cycle through their suspension. So if you did not have a chain cleaning device, you could take a brush. You can actually use a toothbrush, an old toothbrush if you wanted to do that. I'm going to use the gear brush, and first off, I will just spin the crank backwards and spray my degreaser, which I'm using Simple Green here, on the chain. Then take your brush, dip it into the soapy water, spray some Simple Green or degreaser on the brush, and just spin the crank backwards. Get the chain at the cassette on top of the chain, and then hold your brush down here, spin the crank backwards, and let it run across the brush. Then you'll just do what I did in the original video, and that is get the cassette covered in degreaser, and then just spin the crank backwards and get the cassette clean using the same brush. A few comments that I received have questioned whether or not you actually want to spray water forcefully on a bike. And I consider using a nozzle like a tool. And a tool can make a job a lot easier to get done, but you also need to use some precision. So you don't want to use a stream mode or a jet mode and just go anywhere on the bike that you feel like going. You want to use some precision. For example, when it comes time to spray the grease off the cassette, you don't want to angle the stream of water on the bearings of the hub. You also want to be careful not to really get the disc brakes or the rotors. You want to go directly on the cassette and the chain as you spin it backwards. Again, don't angle it so that the water goes near the brakes or the bearings. The same thing goes for when you're getting the chain rings cleaned off. After you've done your degreaser and use the brush on the chain rings, you just want to make sure the stream of water does not get forced on the bottom bracket. It goes directly on the chain rings. So just use precision and caution to make sure that stream of water stays directly on the chain rings. So if you use care and precision when you're cleaning the chain rings and cassette and other parts of the bike, and make sure the water does not get forced in the bearings, that extra spray that goes near the bearings is going to be less water that would hit your bike when you're going through a stream crossing, or if you have your bike on the car when you're driving through rain. If you have any concern about forcing water in any part of your bike when it comes to getting the soap off, you can use a mist mode. And the mist mode can really get most of the soap off your bike, even the wheels and the rims, without forcing water anywhere on the bike. Now you still probably want to use like a stream or a jet directly on the chain and the cassette, but for the rest of the bike you can use that mist mode. Now if your bike is super muddy, like I said in the beginning, you probably want to use something like a shower mode to get that mud off before you start the detail cleaning, especially if you've gotten your bike muddy, put it on the car, and the mud's kind of dried as you've driven home. A frequent comment that I get is, can I get my bike clean without an air compressor? And the answer is yes, you can. Now I would not recommend letting it just totally air dry. So what I recommend is first getting the chain dry. Take a clean rag or a paper towel, put it around the chain, spin the crank backwards, and just get the chain dry. If you let water sit on a chain, there's a good chance you're going to get some surface rust on the chain. The same thing goes for your cassette. You don't want to let water sit on a cassette because again you can get some surface rust. So take a towel and just floss, so to speak, between each teeth of the cassette and get those as dry as possible. Now it's probably not going to get totally dry like it would with an air compressor, and it's going to be more time consuming. But if you don't have a compressor, that is definitely the next best thing. And while I'm talking about the cassette, let me also say that you can use these gear brushes when cleaning the cassette. And I didn't show it in my original video, but these can go between the teeth of the cassette and really get some of that gunk and grease off that's in there. So again, this is a really good tool, not only for the brush, but for the other end, which gets in the teeth of the cassette. And then for the rest of the bike, without a compressor, just take your clean rag or paper towels and just go over as much of the frame and other components as you can, and just get it as dry as possible. Another tip is you can actually take the bike out of the work stand and bounce it, and it will also get some of the water off of things like derailleurs and parts of the frame. One really nice thing about the air compressor is that it gets water out of things like stem bolts and water bottle bolts. So if you don't have one, what you can do is just take a Q-tip and go in each bolt and get the water out so you don't get surface rust inside. While I was making my original video, kind of near the end, I took a brush and wiped down the rotors. Now, a lot of people have questioned that, and I need to clarify that when I do that, I make sure that the brush that I use for that is very clean and does not have any grease. I use several brushes, as you saw, and that one I make sure is very clean. So to avoid any confusion and any contamination on the pads or the rotors, I'm going to recommend that you don't do that. And instead, when you're finished, what you need to do is take a very clean paper towel, put some rubbing alcohol, something like this that you can just get at any Walgreens or any drugstore. Just put some of the rubbing alcohol on the paper towel and very carefully spin the wheel and hold the rotor and wipe it down. Now when you do this, I'm going to give you a very important safety tip, and that is you don't just let the wheel spin freely and try to hold the paper towel on the rotor. It's very easy for you to get your finger caught in there, and that can do some serious damage. I've seen some pretty nasty pictures of people getting their fingers caught in a disc rotor. So hold your other hand on the wheel as you spin, and then just wipe it down with the rubbing alcohol. You can do the same thing on the stanchion tubes and the shaft of the shock when you're finished cleaning the bike. Taking the clean paper towel with the rubbing alcohol and wiping those down and making sure there's no debris or dirt on those. Again, do this when you're finished cleaning the bike. Hopefully this follow-up video will give you some additional tips and further clarify how you can get a bike pretty clean in about 15 minutes. If you didn't see the original video, I recommend that you go back and watch that one in addition to this follow-up video. Thanks for watching.